Hello everyone, this is Marcy, and welcome back to another video. On today's video, we're going to be talking about noun cases and declensions in Thiwaproma. No fuss, let's just jump right in. So, there are two things you need to know when declining a noun in Thiwaproma. The first of which being gender. There are two types of gender, solar and lunar, which were historically a distinction between animate and inanimate nouns. A lot of nouns kind of fall in neatly under these two categories. Like here we have the solar nouns, le bon, luia, fechombuya, sibling, person, okay, animate. Luia, which means sun, it's solar by proxy. And we have sailor, again, a person, animate. And, of course, some lunar nouns, which also make sense to be in the lunar category. Stachuga, Shalek, Viaya, they're all inanimate, as you could see, and the word night is very much a moon thing. However, not all nouns fall into either category so neatly. For example, we have these two words here, which are somewhat synonymous, but one is solar and one is lunar. Then we have a weird thing with ulombu, which is boat, but it's solar. When last I checked, boats don't eat, sleep, and poop, so... And then we have this other case where ina is clearly inanimate. It's a lunar noun because it's mountain. It doesn't do anything on its own merits. But the word for mountain chain is solar for some reason. Now the last two, olombu and inagachu, boat and mountain chain, those were historically compounds in Proto-Thiwaproma. The compounds being water hand, which you could think of as a poetic way of mentioning or describing what a boat is. It's a water hand. And a mountain chain used to be mountain forest in the sense that they're talking about a forest of mountains. The word forest became a derivational affix to signify a collective of a noun. So pretty much like any other European language, you kind of have to memorize gender, even though it is somewhat easy to memorize them, but it doesn't always follow the pattern neatly, as languages tend to do. Aside from memorizing gender, you'd also have to memorize a noun's word strength. What is word strength? It is basically what syllable ends a word. What's the word final syllable? And keep in mind, it's a word. It's not just nouns. This isn't only applicable to nouns. Verbs do this. Adjectives kind of do this. Even postpositions. However, by far, nouns are the most influenced by this feature of Thiwaproma. A word's strength can either be weak or strong. Weak nouns tend to end in an open syllable with a plain vowel. So, a, I, u, e, o, you get the idea. Strong nouns, however, end in these set of parameters: a front-rounded vowel, or a nasal vowel, or a diphthong, or a consonant, or a schwa. A lot can define a strong noun, which is honestly a lot easier to find rather than a weak noun. To get a sense of what weak and strong distinction might be like, here are a few examples. So we have huropla. What do you think it is? It is a weak noun, indeed, because it ends in an open, pretty much a very standard vowel. Ah, makes sense. How about moth? It ends in F, so it's strong. So it's got a consonant, strong, easy. Nadegi, which means hair, easy. It is a weak noun. E, open syllable. Brogoryu. Ah, there you go. There's that front rounded vowel, so it must be a strong noun. Ibua. Yes, it's strong because it's got a diphthong. And lastly, the go. It's a strong noun. Oh, you thought it was like a weak noun because it ended in o? Oh yeah, I forgot this, I'm sorry. There you go. Yes, ghost consonants exist in Thiwaproma, and that also plays a role in word strength. Ghost consonants are a prerequisite for strong nouns. These ghost consonants only appear when the following word starts with a vowel. It's kind of like French, where the consonant is written at the end of the word, but it isn't pronounced. Only in certain situations does it ever get pronounced. It's something like that, essentially. This is called liaison. And a good chunk of consonants actually fall into this liaison, so keep an eye out for that. But once you've gotten your head around the fact that you have to memorize gender, the distinctions between lunar and solar, and also the two types of word strength, we could finally move on to actually declining nouns. Nouns decline for case, and only case. Depending on what gender the noun takes, the case could also vary. Solar nouns take on the accusative, genitive, dative, locative, and ablative, whereas the lunar nouns take on the ergative, possessive, dative, locative, and postpositional. And as you could see from here, you could tell that there is an ergativity split between the lunar and solar nouns, where the nominative accusative alignments for the solar nouns, whereas the lunar one takes the ergative absolutive. Yes, ergativity split on gender. What a fun concept. The function of a noun in a sentence in Thiwaproma depends on what case it takes, but also somewhat what gender it takes. The first four here, the nominative, accusative, ergative, and the absolutive, just deal with morphosyntactical alignment, that stuff with the ergativity split. The dative case, however, marks indirect objects and is also the solar benefactive case, essentially. The genitive marks solar inalienable possession and also deals with relation, whereas the ablative marks the alienable possession for solar nouns. The possessive case basically strong-arms both alienable and inalienable possession, but just for lunar nouns. The locative marks the comitative, instrumental, and locative, with postpositions to help enforce what kind of meaning the locative case is trying to convey. And of course, finally, we have the postpositional case, which inflects lunar nouns for particular postpositions. I looked this up on Wikipedia, and there doesn't seem to be a postpositional case. There just seems to be a prepositional case instead. I don't know why it's a prepositional case. It should honestly be an adpositional case because, European languages aren't the only languages or aren't the normal for languages. Just a thing. But I digress. As always, the nominative and absolutive are left unmarked. Makes sense. And speaking of marking, we get to actually see the declensions. Here are the solar noun declensions, and here are the lunar ones. Those with a keen eye might notice that the lunar dative is also the solar accusative. This is not a mistake. The word that eventually evolved into this morpheme for either gender used to be the postposition to, or towards, essentially. Another thing you might have noticed is on the bottom half of the table, there are a bunch of circumfixes that start with phi. And this kind of ties into the distinction between lunar and solar nouns. Remember how solar is basically animate and lunar is inanimate? Well, the reason why a lot of those circumfixes exist kind of have to deal with agency, or how the Nabuthro, the speakers of Thiwaproma, perceived agency. Lunar, inanimate nouns had no agency. At least, the Nabuthro perceived them to have no agency. So, if a lunar noun or an object that carried the lunar connotation did something, it was not because the object had will, it's because some invisible force that had will, or some kind of being, moved it or controlled it, did something whilst also carrying or bringing along that object. So this led to the construction of it or they with the noun did X. And you can see here with this sentence, Vihi golacha ma, which basically means it with a rock, essentially. Keep in mind, this is postpositions, so the thing goes at the back. this particular construction eventually got crunched into the case that we see today, or at least in standard modern Thiwaproma. Biloshma, which basically is rock, but in the ergative case. Now, the quirky thing about this construction is that it doesn't only apply to transitive verbs. This could also apply to intransitive or monovalent verbs, if the idea behind it is that whatever this lunar noun is, it can't be animate enough to do the verb. Say, for example, I'm not sure, laughing. So if rocks can't laugh, at least that's how they perceive it. So yeah, it can't do that. But if it's like lying down, sure, that's fine. An inanimate lies down by normal standards. So it depends on the verb as well. And this basically concludes everything about case and declension. Everything's right here. You could take a good glance at it, oogle at it if you want, rub your fingers against the screen. There is one last thing, however. Lunar nouns have two forms. Yes, I know. We already have to memorize gender, solar, lunar, and now you have to also memorize word strength. And now this two-form thing for lunar nouns? Yes, I'm sorry. Thiwaproma is complex. Lunar nouns have two forms, that being the feeless form and the fee form. And from that, you could probably guess that these have something to do with the circumfixes that pertain to the cases that have fee in the beginning. And those cases being the ergative, possessive, and postpositional. The difference can be little, like these words right here. Some of them mild, like the differences can somewhat be eyed at, but it'll still be a lot to memorize. And some of them are just incredible differences, like look at these two words. The word for mineshaft, grajutro, and the fee form for it is rataro. I'm not making that up. Thankfully for the Nabuthro, these forms are indeed written in the dictionaries that they have. And you might also notice that another important thing about these forms is that the word for spider, as you can see here, igolo, in the feeless form, it looks like it is a weak noun because it doesn't have a ghost consonant. But the fee form does have a ghost consonant, this sh at the end of yilkolosh. But it isn't too hard to memorize. If the lunar noun has a strong form in either fee or feeless, then it is a strong lunar noun, essentially. And there you have it. Noun declensions in Thiwaproma. If you have any questions about these noun declensions or the cases, feel free to ask in the comments below. And I'd love to hear what you'd want to see me talk about next, be it Thiwaproma verbs this time around, auxiliaries, conjugations. Do you want to hear more of halostrovi? Let me know. I would love to read all about what you have to say. But for the time being, thank you so much for watching. Or in Thiwaproma, Piraplowayo rado benayuga marido. And until next time, have a wonderful day wherever you are on the world. Ta-da! Nouns declown... Oh, I'm gonna leave that as like a video ending outtake. Holy